Okay, we're going to go into, the next section is going to be on adult learning activities. This will obviously be one that we'll talk about the modifications that might be necessary. Let's see. Well, most of you have been through my training, so you know we do flip chart exercises, but let me go ahead and explain it. We have 6 stations, so starting over here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Each of those stations have a statement or a question that you're going to brainstorm with your small group the answers or the responses to that statement. And so I'm going to number you off, and whatever your number is, I'd like you to go to that station, and when everybody's in place, then I'll come around and give you a pen that you can use. Now, one of the things, we'll have some music playing, but you only have 1 minute to brainstorm as many answers as you can come up with. And then I'm going to ring a bell, and you're going to rotate clockwise. So if you start on 1, you're going to move to 2, etc. Until you've answered all 6, been at all 6 stations. Okay? Any questions? Did I explain it like you understand? Those of you especially that do this already. Okay, so let's go ahead, and Brenda, we'll start with you. You'll be 1,
2,
3.
5, 6.
Perfect. Okay, find your station. One of you is going to be the scribe, so one of you will be writing. Introduce yourselves if you haven't met already. Okay, pick a pen. Okay, pick a pen. And you guys get purple. Okay. All right. Now don't peek yet. All right. Now, when I tell you to start, you will have 1 minute to brainstorm, and at that time you can go ahead and drop. Actually, you guys will get 1.5 minutes because you have to read the question first. But anyway, I'll have you drop your flip chart, and then you can start writing. Is everybody ready to go? On your mark, get set, go. Okay, time to stop. Go ahead and rotate to the right, or clockwise. Well, was it helpful to think about some of these questions and things that we don't really give a lot of attention to? Let me ask you, okay, so let's look at the challenges. There's a couple of ways that you can use these flip charts. One is what I call teaching to the flip chart. So it's actually, going over the specific answers and asking questions. Let's take the client one, for example. Describe the client you work with, your impressions. And I see descriptions like difficult, frustrated, resistant, determined, confused, broken, diverse background, cultural. So you have a lot of great descriptions here. Bless you. But let me ask you, with these clients that you work with, do you think any of them are somebody's brother or sister? Okay. Maybe somebody's father or mother? Okay. When we look at them through the lens of being broken people in need of healing and change and all that, can that be tempered with looking at them as people not much different than we are? That they're in relationship with somebody? That they mean something to somebody else? And the reason I ask that is because it helps us when we're evaluating and working with them, especially when they become difficult and resistant. It helps us to humanize them a little bit more rather than pathologize them. And yet this is generally where our mind goes, isn't it? Is we kind of pathologize them. I know when, as a probation officer, I developed the first adult gang caseload in Kern County. And I remember one time looking at this big old guy in this Pendleton and scary looking, and I remember just thinking, you were somebody's 2-year-old little boy. What happened to you? And it completely changed the way I interacted with that caseload. Not that I wasn't still holding them accountable and wasn't still, monitoring their behaviors, but it did change my inner attitude toward working with them. And so I would encourage you, especially because there's going to be times you're going to get somebody in your group who's really done something very heinous, and it will be very difficult. All these things will apply. But when you start to look at them as they were once a little boy or a little girl, what was it? What happened in their life? What happened to you? When we talk about trauma-informed services, and on the back of that handout I gave you, it talks about some of the trauma-informed from SAMHSA. One of the things we want to consider is, rather than what's wrong with you, it's what's happened to you. What has gone on in your life that has put you in this position where you're making these kind of choices and you're engaging these kind of behaviors? Because we need to address the behaviors, we need to address the choices, but we certainly want to look at what has happened to you. Look at them as a person. Look at them as somebody that we would want working with our family member, for example, that we know just kind of got off the track a little bit but needs to get back on. Any thoughts or questions on that?
I spend a lot of time at the end of my group talking about, and I think we wrote it up there, these people are really resourceful and valuable. They just are lost. They just use it in the wrong way sometimes.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I talk about that a little bit, because a lot of them will complain like, man, I can't get to my class. I don't have the money, and I don't have a ride. I don't have this, and I tell them, well, look, just think about it this way. If somebody called you from Shafter and they had some real good crystal, man, I bet you'd come up with something real quick and be over there in 30 minutes. And
Right.
they say, yeah, you're right, Mr. Sosa. And I said, yeah, you just got to use those ideas in the right way to do what you need to do.
Very good. And that's correcting that thinking, those thinking errors, that they can't do something when in fact, they've been able to do a lot of things, given the right motivation. And that's part of our job as a facilitator, is to help with that motivation. How do we motivate them to want to make those changes? So very good. I like that, the resourceful. And I see the red group also acknowledge that. Any other thoughts or questions? Yes, Juan.
It's just really interesting when we talk about identity, and one of the questions that we talk to our clients all the time is to ask them to answer the question of who are you?
Yes.
And they'll say a name. It's like, well, that's your name, but that's not who you are. But you brought up a good point in saying they are sons, they are brothers, they are fathers. But even they themselves have forgotten that they are a son, that they are a father, that they are a brother,
Right.
because of all these other titles that they've been given. And so to redirect them to remember, no, you are a son,
Yes.
or you are a brother. That's great.
Yeah, it's that relationship connection. Very good.
Yeah, just to piggyback, that was a good way to humanize it. I worked for about 6 months with sex offenders,
Uh-huh.
and out of a class of 25, 20 of them were sex offenders, and so to be able to look past, the file and everything that they've done, and be able to see
Right.
those things that the way you just said it right now a moment ago, that was somebody's son. That was 2-year-old, boy at one time, and it kind of brought clarity. And it's not an easy task for everyone to take to work with that population, but
Right.
They were some of the best students I've ever had, So just finding.
But you had the attitude of wanting to work with them and wanting to affect some change. And I think, that's really a question we have to ask ourselves, and as agency providers, ask the people we're hiring. Are you just doing time, getting a paycheck, or do you really want to make change? Because we can, as long as your internal motivation is to help people make a change and improve their lives, we can teach you the skills. It's having that desire to want to help. And I think, especially when I work victim witness, I worked with a lot of victims of domestic violence, and sometimes it was pulling teeth to try to get them into counseling, because unfortunately they had negative experiences when they were younger with interns who were just starting or whatever, or somebody who was probably in the wrong field. And unfortunately, here they are now really desperately in need of counseling, and they're refusing to go because they had such a bad experience. So I think it's important for us to evaluate ourselves. One of the classes I teach on is vicarious trauma and burnout. It's important to recognize that. You may have that internal desire, but if you're burning out, you know, you're not good to yourself, you're not good to the clients you're working with. And that's important for, you know, agencies as well, to recognize that in your staff and redirect and move them into some other areas, get them some opportunities to kind of move on and move past that. So, because it can happen, and what happens is when we start going into burnout, that's what the clients start becoming, are kind of burdensome, you know, and so I think when we're looking at them, and I appreciate that you guys are recognizing that that could be a really valuable point. And like you said, Juan, so many of them, they are labeled. They are the crime that they've done. I'm the burglar, I'm the drug addict, you know, I'm the murderer. And what we do does not define who we are. It's something we've done, but it doesn't define who we are. So we, even when we look at our own language, are we working with batterers, or are we working with people who have committed domestic violence and are now ordered to a class? You know, sometimes it's a lot more words, and I'm the first one to raise my hand saying I get sloppy and I just throw the label out there because we all know what we're talking about. But we do want to be careful, especially with our clients, that we are not labeling them in that sense. Okay, so another technique you can use is to actually have a person from each group share the answers that were given on the flip charts. What I just did, by teaching to it, it means I take the information and I start giving you more information, challenging you to think in a different way, or looking at maybe there were things on that list that I wanted to bring to your attention. And if what these provide an opportunity for, in this part of the adult learning, is to bring in their life experience. See, I don't have to come and tell you guys what a good facilitator is. I don't have to stand up here and preach at you, because the bottom line is you just told me you know what a good facilitator is. You've come up with the answers yourself. Now, I can take that and move it to another level, and when we're teaching to a flip chart, sometimes that's what we need to do, is we need to take what they've given and then we're going to add more information. Maybe we're going to reinforce information. For example, we do this with, say, with anger. And one of the things we might add is, well, you know what, we're going to talk about, you guys brought this point up, we're going to talk about that in 3 more weeks. We're going to bring up more information and really get deeper into that subject. So what you've done is you have increased anticipation, because you found out what they already know and you've told them you're going to learn something more in 3 weeks. You think they're going to be back in 3 weeks if they really are curious about that subject? So you've invited that. So one of the things that the flip chart does, it creates energy, okay? It allows us to create, so did you guys feel like you weren't ready, bless you, you weren't ready to fall asleep when you're doing that? It's a great way to get your groups up. Give me some other things that you noticed that the flip chart exercise did.
We talk more to each other.
Engagement.
Good, you engaged with each other, okay? Talking to each other. Piggybacking on that statement, what else? Were you working with the same people you were sitting?
I don't want to be the extrovert.
What was that?
I don't want to be the extrovert, but it gets your blood flowing. You move around, you create energy, you know, it's good for it.
It does.
Rather than sit in a chair for 2 hours.
Yeah, it's hard to just sit for 2 hours. And I know at Lerdo, you're going to have a challenge a little bit with that. Sometimes just having them turn to somebody, it's movement, okay? Movement just as simple as turn to the person next to you and discuss something. What you've done is you've got them physically moving a little bit, and you've also got them engaging with somebody else instead of sitting there constant, just doing the listening part. Mixed it up. Where'd that come from? I heard that. Okay.
You mixed it up. You had people work together that didn't know each other.
Yes. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen then when 2 weeks from now you're used to sitting at that table, but somebody's taken your chair? Where do you think you're likely to go look for another chair? Somebody you just did the flip chart with. Because now all of a sudden I know somebody that I don't normally sit with, I know somebody else. So it engages them with other people. You guys were really good about it as far as introducing yourselves, but that's one thing you want to remind your participants. It's amazing how they don't introduce themselves to each other. So you need to give them permission. Introduce yourselves to each other before you start the exercise. And you guys did that. What else stands out to you as far as this exercise?
Also the opportunity to really think about just what are some of the answers, you know, or answers for the questions, and to process what was already up there. So making you really think about that.
Exactly. Good. So thinking about it, and then, like you said, processing, seeing, oh, I'm not the only one who had that answer. Somebody else thinks the same way I do. Any other thoughts? Observations? I went around and offered you pens. Did you notice I offered, not handed them to you? Why would that be important? Choice. Very good. Give them opportunities to make choices. So many of our clients don't make choices, especially in jail. You know, they don't decide what clothes to wear that day. They don't decide what time they're going to get up or, you know, what food they're going to eat. I mean, they don't make many choices, so we're giving them that opportunity. From a cultural perspective, cultural being broadly used, why would it be important to let you pick that particular, because I had 6 different colors.
Ownership, I mean, taking some pride. For me, it's funny, the group I was in, my favorite color is red.
Uh-huh.
So when
I knew it was red.
but when the pens were handed, Fabiola went and picked the red, and then it was really neat what she did. She turned around and looked at us and she says, "Is red okay?" And
Yep.
we were all pretty much in agreement. It was like, perfect, that's my color. I feel good about it. So I mean, the choice. I think it's empowering also when you have that instead of, you know, here's an orange pen. No offense to the orange group, but that would not have been my, you know.
And you brought up 2 really good points. And one, about asking, whenever you see, one of the things we want to do in our groups is encourage pro-social behavior. So if you see that happening in your group, you want to take that opportunity, that quick second to say, wow, that was really thoughtful of you to ask the group what they wanted. You want to reinforce that kind of behavior because for many of them, they don't think about that. They just grab. It's all about them. And then the second thing was about the color. Even your attitude was different because you got to have the color you liked. Now, I think you're familiar enough with gangs to realize that some of them have different color schemes than others, okay? So I've got a class with people that are part of the Bloods, part of the Crips, and I go to the group that has the Bloods and I hand him a blue pen. What do you think I just did? Shut it down, disrespected him, showed I was ignorant. Not only disrespectful, but maybe he just thinks I'm an idiot. I don't even know the difference. But here's the difference, what I've noticed, is if I end up at that group and that blue pen is the only one that's left, they're more likely to accept it simply because it's not that I forced it on them, it's that it was the only color that was left. And they can live with that. Okay, they can live with, not always getting their way all the time. But it is important. That's just such a subtle little thing. But what she just mentioned about being, it just kind of energized her just to have the color she wanted. It can de-energize or shut them down to not even want to participate simply because you did it. And it also, because I watched this when I was training some other facilitators, and I watched them start going and handing it to the group. And I was like, no, let them choose. And the energy, the negative energy that came off with her just handing it to the groups was amazing. And so those are little things. When we're talking about resistance can start very small and it can grow. And so those are little things we can do to just reduce that resistance. Does it really matter? Do I care what color people use on the wall? No. So it doesn't matter. Any other thoughts or questions? Let me give you one more thing. You notice they're kind of spaced a little bit. Whenever you're doing this, you want to be able to give them enough space that they're not overwhelmed by the noise from the other people. If at all possible, you want to use some music, some kind of upbeat music, because it drowns out the other noises of the people talking. Don't use use instrumental, not something with words, because otherwise then they're trying to brainstorm and there's a song in their head, so that makes it difficult. So you want to use something instrumental. But those are just some logistical things to think about.